A funeral meant for the victims of the anti-MONUSCO protest in the city of Butembo, Northeastern DRC, turned into a dispute on Friday. Protesters and authorities did not succeed to reach an agreement on the location of the burial, and some protesters took the coffins from the local morgue. 3 UN peacekeepers and 7 demonstrators were killed on Tuesday amid violent protests against UN's force in the region. We have come to ask the MONUSCO to leave, as we have always feared. MONUSCO has used weapons against us, which has caused more than 11 victims. We are digging graves for the dignified burial of these victims who were killed by the MONUSCO forces. According to the local press, Butembo's protesters gathered at the city's roundabout, where security services used tear gas to disperse them. At times, they even massacre people in the vicinity of the United Nations forces, of the MONUSCO forces. That's what we're tired of. That's what we don't want to see anymore. That's why we're asking the government to cancel all the contracts that it has already signed with the MONUSCO forces. DRC's Ministry for Communication said according to an agreement with the UN, a progressive and phased withdrawal of MONUSCO should take place by 2024. He added UN already left the eastern province of Tanganyika last June. A court in the US decided Commander Khalifa Haftar was liable for war crimes, for extrajudicial killings and torture in Libya. Several Libyan families claim the chief of the eastern-based Libyan National Army is responsible for the bombing and torture of their relatives. Virginia's federal judge said Haftar was convicted since he hadn't cooperated with the justice. She added the senior field marshal could go on appeal and more court hearings were necessary to determine the compensation amounts. The families filed their lawsuit under the 1991 US law, the Torture Victim Protection Act, which allows all citizens in the world to press charges on someone who, acting in an official capacity for a foreign nation, has committed acts of torture and or extrajudicial killing. Rubber sandals may be a common object in most countries, but in Vietnam they have a heritage value. Vietnamese began making them in the 1940s during the First Indochina War using tires from French army trucks. Cheap to make and practical for wet weather, they later became a symbol of the communists' fight against the US. I wore rubber sandals when I was at school in the 1980s. I like them very much. They are of historical value, easy to wear and look nice. This shop in Ho Chi Minh City is the country's rubber sandal leader. The average price for a pair is $10. The shoemakers in the northern city of Hanoi still make them out of tires, respecting the traditional way. We want the rubber sandals to become the heritage, one of the unique products of Vietnam, so when foreigners visit Vietnam, they mention them. These shoes are already a very lucrative business. His shop has sold more than 500,000 pairs in just a decade. His workers use sharp knives and chisels to craft the sandals from huge tires that are almost the same height as them. Nguyen Thien Quong admits the traditional models are bestsellers, but the colorful ones attract young customers. When I changed the style and the format of the sandal, I started having more foreign clients. So to be successful, I have to renew the style of the Vietnamese rubber sandals, while still maintaining the advantage of the handmade method and their historical value. The Southeastern Asian nation is one of the world's top 4 countries for shoe manufacturing, and its factories produce pairs for major brands. The industry generated nearly $12 billion in the first half of this year, according to government figures. At the Fann Hospital in Dakar, a special department provides an opioid substitution therapy program to drug addicts. Commonly called CEPIAD, it is a drop-in clinic aiming to reduce the spread of HIV, as opioids are pain-relieving drugs, often linked to needle sharing and unprotected sex, both high-risk factors for HIV. 250 people are currently following the treatment. Methadone is a medicine that acts as a heroin substitute. In our case, it's a syrup dosed in 10 milligrams per milliliter portions. Doses vary from patient to patient. In Senegal, people who inject drugs are 4 times more likely to get HIV. More than 3/4 of CEPIAD patients are men, but the centre has been reaching out to women as HIV prevalence is higher among them. I go into the community and visit my peers to raise awareness about getting off drugs and reducing their use. I address them to CEPIAD so they can, like me, stop drugs. The centre also offers psychosocial support, encourages professional development and organises courses such as making soap painting and gardening. Gardening is a type of therapy. When we're here, we forget about our problems. In a report published this week, UNAIDS pressed governments to act more against HIV. The international organisation said policies had failed to progress because of the COVID pandemic.
Ending AIDS would cost much less money than not ending AIDS. Importantly, the actions needed to end AIDS are also key for overcoming other pandemics.
UNAIDS launched this report just before the opening of the International AIDS Conference in Canada, which will run until August 2nd.
Good afternoon.
The US announced on Friday its Secretary of State Antony Blinken would travel to South Africa, the DRC and Rwanda between the 7th and the 11th of August. This trip was notified just 2 days after Blinken's Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov completed his African tour in 4 countries. It stands as an additional sign of the battle of influence raging between the Western and Russian sides amid the war in Ukraine and a food crisis. On the very same week, the US also said another top diplomat, President Biden's ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, would head to Ghana and Uganda on August 4th. During his trip, Lavrov rejected accusations that Russia was exporting hunger and instead blamed the West for monopolizing commodity and supply flows during the pandemic, saying it worsened the situation for food imports. The Russian foreign minister also added that sanctions imposed to his country were exacerbating the situation. With these visits, Washington hopes to change the narrative. A tough bet, as many African nations have refused to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine.